Hello, thank you for watching my video strategy guide. This guide will cover the final encounter in the Dragon Soul raid instance, where we finally get to defeat Deathwing. This encounter is known as Madness of Deathwing. This fight seems like it has a lot to learn when you first see all the mechanics, but it's fairly basic after you get an understanding of how to deal with everything. What it boils down to is, just rinse and repeat the same thing 4 times, then burn the boss. Of course, it isn't quite that simple. This seems to be a very versatile fight when it comes to raid makeup. We killed Deathwing with 1 tank and 3 healers, but I have seen kills with everything from 1 tank, 2 healers, to 2 tanks, 3 healers. You may have to experiment to see what works best for you. From our experience, there seems to be some strange synergy with Kalecgos' buffs that increases individual DPS if there are fewer players DPSing. Our overall raid DPS remained the same whether we had 7 or 6 players DPSing, and everyone's individual numbers increased by 8k or so when we dropped a DPS for our 3rd healer. I can honestly say I have no idea why, but I have heard others tell me that they have encountered the same strangeness. Keep an eye out for it, and keep in mind that going from 2 healers to 3 or 1 tank to 2 might not actually lower your raid DPS. The first thing you should notice when you complete Spine of Deathwing is that you have now landed at the Maelstrom. There are 4 platforms here at the brink of the Maelstrom, each one guarded over by one of the aspects that have been assisting you throughout Dragon Soul. You will begin the fight with 4 buffs and special help from all these dragons. First, let's go over what you will face on each platform, then we will have a better idea of how the dragons assist the raid. Each platform will have a limb of Deathwing grasping onto it to hold himself up. Our goal is to kill all 4 of his limbs to complete Phase 1. You will begin a platform by DPSing the limb attached to it. Deathwing will cast Assault Aspect on your platform to begin the cycle for that platform. Throughout the fight, your raid will take damage from Burning Blood, which deals fire damage every 2 seconds, increasing as the limb's HP decreases. 15 seconds after Deathwing begins to assault your platform, a large lava tentacle called Mutated Corruption will spawn at the end away from the Maelstrom. This ad must be picked up by your tank. The Mutated Corruption will randomly pick a target and crush your raid, dealing 100k physical damage in a cone from the tentacle. To mitigate this damage, have your raid spread out while the tentacle is active. The Mutated Corruption will also cast Impale on the tank. The first Impale comes about 15 seconds after it spawns, and the second Impale comes about 35 seconds later. This ability deals 400k physical damage and applies a debuff that will increase the damage of the next Impale. The timing on the debuff is such that if the tentacle casts another Impale, someone else will have to soak that damage. We have myself pop into bear form, taunt, and blow CDs to take any second Impales. In some cases, your DPS may be high enough to avoid the second Impale entirely. 1 minute after Deathwing assaults your platform, he will cast Elementium Bolt. On the first platform, the bolt is cast early at 45 seconds. This bolt travels extremely quickly and will deal 390k fire damage to all players when it lands. It will continue to tick for 390k fire damage every 5 seconds while it remains alive. The bolt is targetable and killable. In some cases, you'll be able to kill it before it lands and avoid all damage. 1 minute 45 seconds after Deathwing assaults your platform, he will begin to Hemorrhage, spawning 6 Regenerative Bloods. On the first platform, the Bloods come early, at 1 minute 30. These Bloods must be picked up by your tank. They will gain 10 energy every second and use full energy to regenerate to full health. Your raid must AoE them down quickly before they gain full energy and heal. They will apply Degenerative Bite to the tank, stacking a 10-second debuff that deals 1500 shadow damage every second per application. At 70% and 40% of Deathwing's limb's health, 6 blistering tentacles will spawn out of the limb. These small tentacles apply a stacking debuff called Blistering Heat to everyone in the raid, and deals 2500 fire damage every 2 seconds, increasing damage taken from Blistering Heat by 5% per application. The blistering tentacles cannot be AoE'd and must be single target DPS down. It is rumored that Chain Lightning and any cleave type effects will damage them as well. 2 minutes after assaulting your platform, Deathwing will begin to cast Cataclysm. It is as bad as it sounds, and will deal 1.5 million fire damage to all players, wiping your raid. Luckily, he will take a full minute to finish casting Cataclysm, so you should have enough time to finish off his limb tentacle before Cataclysm hits. This means that your raid will have 3 minutes maximum to complete each platform. Killing one of Deathwing's limbs will cause him to experience agonizing pain, interrupting his casting, stunning him, and dealing 20% of his health. The aspect on your platform will begin concentrating to keep his limb stump under control, rendering that dragon inactive in the fight until Phase 2. As Phase 1 progresses, the aspect dragons will become inactive one at a time, depending on what platform your raid chooses to be on. It is important to know what buffs each dragon supplies so that you can make a good decision on what order to choose. The first platform on the left, if you are looking towards the Maelstrom, is guarded by Alexstrasza and is referred to as the red platform. Her buff increases everyone's health by 20%. Her special help is in the form of Cauterize, a channel that will kill all blistering tentacles in 5 seconds, so your raid will not have to switch to them, and also reduces the damage the raid takes from Deathwing's constant AoE, Burning Blood. To the right of Alexstrasza is the platform guarded by Nosdormu, and is referred to as the yellow platform. His buff increases everyone's haste by 20%. His special help is a time zone that he will drop in the middle of any platform your raid is on. This bubble will dramatically decrease the speed at which the Elementium Bolt travels. This will enable your raid to kill the bolt before it hits the ground and deals damage. The bubble will also slow the attack speed of any adds inside of it by 50%. To the right of Nosdormu is a platform guarded by Ysera, and is referred to as the green platform. This is the platform that your raid zones in on. Her buff increases healing done by 20%. Her special help grants every player a special ability called Dream. This should pop up an extra action button in the middle of your screen towards the bottom, just like Alexstrasza. If you do not see it, you can toggle this ability by using the macro /click space extra action button 1. Dream is a 30-second cooldown that will cause you to take 50% less damage for 4 seconds. The far right platform is guarded by Caligos and is referred to as the blue platform. His buff increases players' damage by 20%. His special ability causes his buff to also grant spell weaving on attack. Spell weaving deals 20k arcane damage to enemies within 6 yards, excluding the target. To travel from platform to platform, simply walk off the side towards where you'd like to go. Thrall will bounce you over and give you a 60% move speed buff for 10 seconds. Now that you know everything involved in Phase 1, we can talk strategy. I would recommend trying either green, red, yellow, blue, or green, yellow, red, blue for platform order. We were successful going green, red, yellow, blue. Which order works best for you will depend on your raid's strengths and weaknesses. I will explain the small details of the strategy in the platform order that we used. Start on the platform you came in on. Talk to Thrall to begin the fight. You can start DPSing the limb before the graphic shows that it has landed, even as melee. Switch to the Mutated Corruption when it spawns. You should use DPS cooldowns on the tentacle. Be sure to use your Dream CD whenever it is available while the tentacle is alive. Hopefully you will get lucky and mitigate half of a crush. Tanks can use Dream on Impales to mitigate the damage and save personal CDs for the next platforms. Switch to the bolt as soon as it is in range and kill it before it lands. You may or may not finish off the big tentacle before the bolt becomes active. If not, finish it off after the bolt and begin DPSing Deathwing's limb. Have your tank pick up Regenerative bloods and pull them into the time zone. AoE the bloods when they become active. Use your Dream CD when blistering tentacles spawn to help out the healers. Continue DPSing the limb until it dies. Jump over 2 platforms to the left to begin on red. Begin DPSing the limb. Switch to the Mutated Corruption when it spawns. It will spawn quicker here, as your raid spent time traveling. Tanks will need to use personal cooldowns to survive Impales. Kill the bolt as soon as possible. Finish off Mutated Corruption if it is still alive, and then begin to DPS the limb. Have your tank pick up Regenerative bloods and pull them into the time zone. AoE the bloods when they become active. Use any short cooldown personal damage reduction CDs you have when blistering tentacles spawn. Continue DPSing limb until it dies. Jump over 1 platform to the right to begin on yellow. Begin DPSing the limb. Switch to the Mutated Corruption when it spawns. Tanks use personal cooldowns to survive Impales, possibly linking 2 this time as you will no longer have the 20% health buff. Kill the bolt as soon as possible. Finish off the Mutated Corruption if it is still alive, and begin DPSing the limb. Have your tank pick up Regenerative bloods and pull them into the time zone. AoE bloods when they become active. This time, you will have to single target and DPS down the blistering tentacles when they spawn. There are a few ways you can try to control this. You can assign a few DPS to start on the left and a few on the right so they meet up in the middle, or just have everyone start on the same side. It doesn't really matter how you do it, as long as they die. You will want to kill them by the time your raid has reached about 20 stacks of blistering heat, or the damage will become very high. Continue DPSing the limb and kill the next set of blistering tentacles. Then jump over 2 platforms to the right to begin on blue. Begin DPSing the limb. Switch to the Mutated Corruption when it spawns. Tanks use personal cooldowns to survive Impale. Link 2 as you still do not have the 20% health buff. This time when the Elementium Bolt is cast, it will rocket onto the platform and drop immediately as you have lost Nosdormu's time zone that was slowing it down. Your raid will take the bolt's impact damage, so have everyone stack up at a predetermined spot and blow raid survival cooldowns. We used a Disc Priest barrier and Spirit Link Totem to mitigate the damage. Kill the bolt ASAP. We had the raid stack up on the tank of the Mutated Corruption, as we would be very close to killing it but not quite. This can cause some problems as the second Impale will be cast right after the bolt hits, so if a tank will be taking the second Impale, they will need big cooldowns, possibly an outside cooldown, to help them survive, such as Lay on Hands or GS. After the bolt is dead and the Mutated Corruption is dead, begin DPSing the limb. Switch to Blistering Tentacles and burn them down single target. AoE the Regenerative Bloods only after Blistering Tentacles are dead. You may have timing issues here, where you will have Blisterings and Degeneratives at the same time. Have your tank OT the adds until Blisterings are dead, then begin AoE right after the Bloods have gotten full energy and healed. Do not waste time and resources DPSing them at 50 energy, as they will heal before you can kill them. You might want to have your OT call when to start AoE DPS. Continue DPSing the limb and kill the last set of Blistering Tentacles. This last set may require a raid cooldown, such as the DPS's Tranquility or Divine Hymn, as DPS will be busy in Phase 2, and you will need to save the good healer cooldowns. Kill the fourth limb and you will engage Phase 2. For this phase, jump over one platform to the left, back to the platform you started on. Deathwing's head will fall onto the platform and become attackable. All aspects have rejoined the fight, and you will have all of their buffs and special help back for this final phase. During Phase 2, there will be 2 sets of adds that you'll need to deal with. The first set will spawn about 10 seconds into Phase 2, and are called Elementium Fragments. They are smaller lava tentacles, and spawn as a set of 3. Their spawn positions are random, so you may get lucky and be able to cleave 2 or all 3. You should switch to the Fragments ASAP. Fragments cast Shrapnel, a 6-second cast that will deal 200k physical damage on impact. This cast is directed at a random player, and that player will have a debuff applied to them that will show the time remaining on the cast. Watch your debuffs while killing the fragments. If you are targeted for shrapnel, use your Dream ability when you have about 2 to 3 seconds left on the debuff. This will half the damage and save your bacon. You should be able to kill the fragments by the time the second wave of shrapnel has gone out. We do not run into any players getting targeted twice in a row, so you should not have to worry about having Dream on cooldown when targeted with shrapnel. After the fragments die, you will have a couple seconds to DPS Deathwing. 25 seconds into Phase 2, 2 Elementium Terrors will spawn. These must be picked up by your tank or tanks and DPS down ASAP. Pull them into Nosdormu's time zone to slow their attack speed. Elementium Terrors apply a stacking debuff called Tetanus, dealing 60k physical damage on hit and 30k physical damage per second. Your tank or tanks will need to blow defensive cooldowns to survive the debuffs. After both terrors are dead, you are now free to lay into Deathwing. Deathwing still deals AoE fire damage every 2 seconds like his limbs, and will become incrementally higher as his health drops. The plateaus are at 15%, 10%, and 5% health, and are very noticeable. 5% will feel like an enrage, and should be treated as such. You'll want to use Bloodlust and 1 raid survival cooldown at 10%, then blow everything you got at 5. You will likely have the next set of fragments spawn right before 5% as well, though they will not cast shrapnel right away and the cast lasts 6 seconds, allowing you to ignore them and simply burn Deathwing. I highly recommend just having everyone in the raid use their Dream cooldown at 5%, regardless of fragments. The final 5% of Deathwing will be a race to see who dies first. As long as you have high enough DPS to complete the platforms and a firm plan in place to survive Phase 2, you should have a dead dragon. Usually here I would append our first kill video, but since this is such a long fight, I will just leave you with a link instead. Thank you all very much for your support and kind words, and I look forward to bringing you heroic guides very soon.